So we are doing Mishnah Pirke Avot, and are we at Chapter 2, Mishnah 2?
Chapter 2, Mishnah 3.
Mishnah 3.
We finished Mishnah 2.
Aha. All right. Hevozehirim barashut she'ein mekarvin lo le'adam ela letzorech atzman. Nirin ke'ohavin b'sha'at hana'atan ve'ein omdin lo le'adam b'sha'at dachako. What does that mean, Peter?
Beware of the government, for, and he put in square brackets, its leaders only befriend a person for their own needs. They appear as friends when it benefits them, but they do not stand by a person in his time of need.
Well, that's wrong. I suppose it's talking about an individual versus the masses.
I think it's warning the community against relying on goyish authorities. You know, think of the world they were in.
Oh, so you don't think it's necessarily just for... it could... Don't you think this could apply for anyone? Jewish or non-Jewish?
Yeah, it's a warning. In English, place not thy faith in princes.
Right. That's exactly it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you have any commentaries on it?
Yes. The Mishnah... blah, blah, blah. Okay. There are we. This Mishnah is addressed to community leaders, although we learned above in Mishnah 1:10 that, as a general rule, a person should not make himself known to the government. Community leaders must deal with the authorities on a regular basis as part of their job. Rabbi Gamliel therefore warns them that they must be very careful for the reasons given below. Comment 2, the authorities will act friendly when they feel it is to their disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
But in difficult times, when a person needs their help, they will forget about all the kind things that they did for them.
Yeah.
I think it's just a general warning against getting too close to the ruling power, whichever it is. You know, you've got to work with them, but don't rely on them. Take precautions. Protect yourself. Don't rely on the promises they make. And if you think about, say, into the Middle Ages, where they were protected often from the mob by the local bishop or the local
Who
king,
is that?
The Jewish community.
Were protected.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was the other way around.
No, it was often the local bishop who, when the people got riled up around Easter time, would take the Jews into the bishop's palace for protection and things like that.
Goodness.
But there was a cost. You know, you had to keep them happy. And if what he was doing upset the populace, he might hand over his Jewish dependent, you know, to the mob to take attention away from himself.
Appeasement.
I mean, you know what's it called? The Star Chamber. Have you ever heard of that? The Court of the Star Chamber? It was used in England. It was like almost a secret court that dealt with treason. But the reason it was called the Court of the Star Chamber, people think it was because there were stars on the roof. No, it was because it had stars in it. The contracts of the Jews who lent money, which was their only function then, as licensees of the king, would lend money to the nobility. And they did it under royal protection, and the king got a kickback.
Why is it called the Star Chamber?
because it had stars in it.
Stars meaning the documents.
The documents. And that's how it became the court of the Star Chamber.
And what was done in those sorts of places? What was normal business there?
Well, the king kept the records of the Jews' loans. It validated it. But when the kings got into trouble, as they sometimes did with the nobility,
Yeah. When the kings got into trouble with the nobility.
Yeah. Because it was a feudal system. You know, if the king's armies were particularly weak, or some of the bigger nobles got together, the king had to
Find a way.
quieten them down. And often he'd do it by handing over his local Jews and the documents, and they destroy them.
Right.
This is until Edward the Great came along, or Edward first or second, I can't remember, and he just expelled the Jews.
It says here, our Mishnah continues to quote Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. It links, Midrash Shmuel links Rabban Gamliel's opinions to Shemaiah's statement, which was in 110, chapter 110, which is love labour and hate mastery, and do not seek familiarity with ruling authorities. Concerning the love of work, Rabban Gamliel adds that it must go hand in hand with Torah, as it is good to combine the study of Torah with the worldly occupation. Shemaiah's admonition to hate prominence is qualified by Rabban Gamliel, who says that it is not necessary to reject the reins of power, as long as they are used for the sake of heaven and not for one's own benefit. And Shemaiah's warning against seeking familiarity with the authorities is modified by Rabban Gamliel from total withdrawal. And Shemaiah's warning against seeking familiarity with the authorities,
getting too comfortable with them,
is modified by Rabban Gamliel from total withdrawal. Any possible demand from those involved in public affairs, that makes sense, who must often be in touch with the authorities to the need of exercising great caution, as stated in this Mishnah. So that's why it says, be cautious. We know you're going to have to do it, but be cautious.
But again, you see this sort of thing happening in the time of the Gaonim, where the head of the Jewish community, whose name escapes me for a moment, but who was descended from David,
Right.
Worked hand in glove with the Baghdad Caliphate, and the fortunes of the community tended to rise and fall depending on how close the relationship was, and where the Caliph and again, I can't think of putting the name to mind, to the head of the community was good, things would blossom, and then if they had a falling out, then, you know, the Muslim persecutions would pick up.
Yeah. By the way, I like to look at the kind of Hasidic sort of deeper aspect of these kinds of statements. So, what would you, if you could
find that in Kahati?
No, you won't. You won't find it in yours either. I mean, you won't find it in anything except something like a Breslov or a something else. But the words are Hevu Zahirin, be cautious, Berashut. So the Rashut is the authorities in this case. So if you had to look at that and look at it from a Hasidic perspective, what would you say, maybe? No. I feel like it's also like a warning about your Yetzer Hara, who, like, with the word Rashut is kind of like possession. It's like the Yetzer Hara can tempt you to do things, and be cautious. And sometimes it can be a good thing, but being cautious means always being aware, being wary of where it's going.
No, I mean, if you're going to take that thought and extend it, the term ruling power can be applied to the power that tends to rule your soul, the temptations and all the rest.
Exactly. Because then there's the kind of more the Hasidic aspect of kindness and giving, whereas the Reshut is more like the taking. And so you would, and it doesn't do it except for its own advantage. The Yetzer Hara doesn't act except for its own advantage. And even though it seems to your benefit, like it says, in a time of distress, the Yetzer Hara goes, mate, you did. It's all up to you.
You got yourself
into this. Okay. Chapter 2, Mishnah 4. Hu haya omer. Aser retzono kirtzonach, kedei she'aser retzonach kirtzono. Batel retzonach mipnei retzono, kedei she'yivatel retzon acherim mipnei retzonach. Hillel omer, al tifrosh min hatzibur. ואל תאמן בעצמך עד יום מותך, ואל תדין את חברך עד שתגיע למקומו, ואל תאמר דבר שאי אפשר לשמוע, שסופו להישמע, ואל תאמר, לכשאפנה אשנה, שמא לא תיפנה. English. In English, it looks to me like just as much of a tongue twister.
Rabbi Gamliel used to say, treat his will, his will
God,
as your will, in order that he treat your will as his will. Nullify your will before his will, in order that he nullify the will of others before your will. The Mishnah returns to the teachings of Hillel, who was quoted earlier in the Mishnahs. Hillel says, do not separate yourself from the community.
One has withdraw.
Do not trust in yourself until the day you die. Do not judge your friend until you reach his place. Do not say something that cannot be understood, assuming that it will eventually be understood.
What's the word for that? So don't speak in ambiguity. Yeah?
And do not say, when I am free, then I will study, for perhaps you will not be free. And there are lots of comments on that.
Yeah, I'm interested to go through each one of them.
Yeah, okay. A person should spend his money to fulfill God's will as if he was spending it on himself, and in return God will reward him richly.
Sorry,
That's according to Rav.
Could you please repeat that? That went off on a tangent I was not expecting.
Ditto. I think Rav has a very materialistic view.
Okay.
Because, I mean, what it's saying is, treat his will as your will in order that he treat your will as his will.
Yeah. So what did Rav say?
According to this, it means a person should spend his money to fulfill God's will as if he was spending it on himself, and in return God will reward him richly. Goes on, people tend to worry about wasting, in quotation marks, too much money on charity and the performance of commandments. However, when we keep in mind that it is God who gave us our wealth in the first place, we can be assured that not only will such spending not impact our finances,
And this is the giving to charity.
but God will repay us in this world many times over for using our money to do his will. This is according to Rabbeinu Yonah.
Now, so that's according to the source, that's the makor for that is Rabbeinu Yonah. Is that correct?
Rav and Rabbeinu Yonah.
Because that's a very, very big Hasidic attitude. That if I give, I'll get twice back. All that sort of stuff.
Well, where do you think the Hasidim got it from? Rabbeinu Yonah's before them.
Right, they got it from somewhere.
So
but that's really going outside the scope of what that's talking about.
It's very materialistic. The way I read it is, treat his will as your will in order that he will look at your actions as if they're part of his will. That is, if you conform your actions to what God desires,
Yep.
then from God's point of view, your will is the same as his.
Yeah. And the material aspect
Yeah.
is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Or is an aspect, but it's
Yeah.
not the major.
No.
And would you believe Bartanura is in agreement with Rav?
Yeah.
It says the Hama'iri is like what you said, but the Bartanura says, do his will as if you were, spend your resources on a religious cause as liberally as if it were your own, and bestow upon, so that he may do as if it was his will, and bestow upon you his generous bounty. Well, the problem is all these guys have got vested interests.
Well, I was about to make a comment along those lines. If they're going to spend their time studying, someone's got to support them. Now, the next note is man's will.
By the way, Kahati goes also according to what you said, which is the standard way of
I would have thought
interpreting or explaining it. He says, fulfilling his commandments, his mitzvot, as devotedly, eagerly as if prompted by your own heart.
Yeah.
So, don't look at them just as a mitzvah that you have to do. You want to pursue them yourself. I think actually that's a really good one, isn't it? Because a lot of people look at mitzvot as being a chore.
And if you want to push it in a Hasidic line, then in doing this, your will amalgamates, joins, gets married to God's will.
That's a good way of looking at it.
And
that's nice, actually. That's very nice, isn't it? You could almost say that
it's a spiritual marriage.
It's a spiritual marriage. That first line is almost like a union. That's very nice. Okay, what's the next thing?
Their note 2 is, man's will is his desire to sin, Tosfot Yom Tov. When a person is tempted by his evil inclination to steal or to eat forbidden foods, for example, he should overcome these feelings and allow the will of God to dictate his behaviour. In return, God will protect him by thwarting the schemes of his enemies. This again is an explanation by Rav.
But it's a bit better.
That's less materialistic, less self-serving.
Yeah.
And the next one is, the Mishnah chose to put some of Hillel, this is where into Hillel's teachings.
Right. Hillel said as in,
Here, since they start off by addressing Rabban Gamliel's topic of a person's relationships to the community, and also because they will be followed by the teachings of Hillel's student, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai.
Is this to do with do not withdraw from the community, don't separate from the community? So what's the explanation, are you saying?
Well, we're about to go into that.
Oh, we're doing that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
A person must not abandon his community when times are bad. Only if he shares in the community's troubles will he merit to share in the community's salvation when it comes.
That's a strange way of looking at it, isn't it? You have to be with them through the thick and the thin?
But then, of course, it reflects the reality of Jewish life. That's another explanation by God.
You mean that
for many centuries,
like the dispersal?
Well,
is that what you mean?
You hang together or you hang separately.
Yeah, do not separate yourself from the community. But it makes it difficult because, if you've got a community that's too closely aligned with kind of the country, the nationalism of the country you live in, that's not really where you want to be, is it?
Well, I've got a lot of German Jews into trouble.
That's where my mind's going. How else would you...
And then, of course, the Polish Jews didn't do any better.
So how do you look at the dispersal in in respect of not separating yourself from the community. I suppose from one perspective it was a matter of no choice.
And look at it another way. How do you survive as a Jew apart from your community?
How do you survive as a Jew apart from your community?
Being a part of the community is so much a part of Jewish life.
Yeah.
That separate from it. And even though you lay tefillin every morning,
yeah,
this was born to my mind of a friend of Joanna's, saying about her grandfather, because she saw me with tefillin, and she said, "Oh, what are those?" And I asked about it.
The phylacteries.
Yeah. And it was explained. She said, my grandfather used to put them on every day. And he was a Jewish bloke who'd married an Irish Catholic woman.
You're talking about my Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet the Jewish side of it had sort of disappeared from the family entirely.
Yeah.
But he used to lay tefillin every day.
Yeah.
Right.
So that gets back to it. Don't separate yourself from the community.
And there are some people actually who are amongst the community who have separated themselves kind of spiritually.
Yeah.
You wouldn't, if you're walking down the street, you wouldn't think twice to think that they were a goy. Is that maybe also part of the idea?
I think it could be, although I'm hesitant to say that because, not showing obvious signs doesn't mean that you're not doing things. It means that you don't want to put off your source of living. I mean, if you're a lawyer, you don't want clients to be put off by the fact that you're wearing a kippah when they come in to discuss their legal case with you.
Really?
Things like that.
I was talking to a young man this morning who is looking to set him and his family up with a house, with a home, because they're renting at the moment. So the question is, where do they buy if they've only got a certain amount of money to spend? And he loves the country, but they're very religious. Kids would be going to, Yeshiva Beth Rivka or whatever, but not close to. So it's not close to the community sort of resources, but they're going to live a completely from life out there. So what does one do in those circumstances for them?
Yeah.
Is this...
And the kids will have to mingle with
the locals?
The locals.
So does that fall into the category of do not withdraw or separate from the community? He doesn't like living, in apartments, all cloistered. Is that the word? Yeah. He needs a bit of air to breathe. So it's a hard call what this really means, do not withdraw.
Yeah, well, there's so many implications.
It has to come down.
What about the totally secular people?
Yeah.
Who still identify strongly with the community, and if the community is under attack,
cultural Jews.
Yeah. Come out in defence and say the things to the goyim that our black-coated friends are too ignorant to be able to say.
Defending them.
Yeah. Who are aware of what will hold in Goyish culture and what won't, what they can understand. Whereas, you know, the
Well, if we had to,
out
if we had to, we would defend the Satmar.
within limits.
We would.
Within limits.
We'd join ourselves with them if we had to.
I would be hesitant to go the whole hog.
They might ask you to do the exams for them next year.
Yeah, thinking of some of the things that are happening in Israel amongst the ultra-fillers in relation to the SARS crisis.
Mm.
You know,
But that's not related to what we're talking about, really, is it?
that's another aspect of it. I mean,
Because they're doing their own thing, and they think that they can escape from the community. Actually, that's interesting. They think that they can escape from the wider community, that they're in some sort of bubble, but they're not.
You've taken that in a direction that I hadn't thought of, but yes, that's also true. That there's a wider community.
So
which they're seeking to separate themselves.
So that's very interesting. So you could actually think about it in terms of the religious community separating itself from the wider general community.
Yeah. Or even the rest of the ultra-religious community from the rest of the religious community.
Even that. You're still part of the whole.
Which they deny. You're not Jewish. I can remember when we were in Israel, we had very from neighbours on the Merkaz Klita, and he had been a functionary of the great synagogue.
What's the Merkaz Klita?
Absorption Centre.
Oh, the absorption centre, that's right.
He had been an official with the great synagogue before in London, before coming to Israel, and his daughters went to one of the ultra-film schools in Jerusalem, and they went off, I think, for a Shabbaton or something like that, or one of them went off for a Shabbaton, and she took pajamas. And the other little girls told her, "You're not Jewish. You're wearing trousers."
Right. To bed at night.
Yeah.
I think you told me that before. Yeah.
You know, sort of. There's so many ways that we lead each other out.
So what does yours specifically explain it out as?
Okay. The person must not abandon his community when times are bad. Only if he shares in the community's troubles will he merit to share in the community's salvation when it comes. That's from Rav. Alternatively, a person must join with his friends and neighbours in Torah study and the performance of mitzvot, since the more people are involved, the more glory is brought to God. It would be a reduction of God's honour and an insult to his name for a person not to participate.
So that ties in with that if you don't join in with a minyan that's nearby you and you prefer to daven by yourself, you're called an evil neighbour, right?
Yeah.
My explanation for that is this is from Masechet Ta'anit, page 11. It says, when Israel dwell in sorrow and a Jew disassociates himself from them, the two ministering angels who accompany man lay their hands on his head and say, this man who detached himself from the community shall not witness the consolation of the community. Furthermore, when the community dwells in sorrow, let no one say, I shall go home and shall eat and drink, and all will be well with me. Rather, he should grieve with the community, and whoever participates in the sorrows of the public will be privileged to witness its consolation. So that's like, it's a little bit like the Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut, and other days, and Siburim, and fast days, and that sort of thing.
But also, again, participating in the overall life of the community.
Yeah.
And number 5 comment, which is, do not trust in yourself until the day you die.
Yeah.
A person cannot assume that just because he has kept the Torah carefully for many years, he will never sin again. The evil inclination never stops looking for ways to trap him. and he must be constantly on his guard until he takes his very last breath. This is called Rabbeinu Yonah.
They give an example from Brachot, page 29. Do not rely on your righteousness, saying that you will never stumble and forfeit your piety, seeing that even Yochanan the high priest served in his post 80 years, yet in the end became a tzeduki.
Yeah, I can say it's Sadducee.
Yeah. And the last one is very nice. Oh, this maybe the next one that you've got.
Okay, the person, do not judge your friend until you reach his place. If we see a person of fine character doing something wrong, we should not be quick to judge him poorly and say that we would certainly have acted differently.
To say someone of fine character. Does it say, is that what you said?
That's what he says.
A fine character.
Mm.
But that's not what it means, really.
No, of course not.
Who says that? Is that Rabbi? Is that Rava again?
That's Rabbeinu Yonah.
Rabbeinu Yonah.
It is impossible to know how the circumstances will affect us until we are actually there, and for a person to assume that he will act any better is to trust in himself too much, something against which Hillel has just warned.
Well, I like the plain basics of that particular one, which is don't judge yourself until you put yourself in their place.
Yeah.
As simple as it is.
Until you reach their place.
Ah.
I think that...
Is that why it says... what is it?
Until you reach the place, you know.
I
think it's much more tolerant.
The Hebrew is ad shetagia limkomo.
You come to this place, which is, you know, all right. You saw somebody falling on hard times. I mean, this isn't it. And he has gone and maybe caught him eating a bit of treif. The family is starving. He brought treif or a non-Jewish bread into his house because it was all that was available. Don't look at him and sneer and say, oh, you know, weakling, until you get to that place of starvation and hardness. And I think that it's probably closer to it.
Yeah, yeah. And there's something that you say quite often is that you've got to think about a lot of these rules and ideas, principles in context. You've got to think about where they are at that time.
Yeah.
Even the populace as a whole, the generation, the civilization that they lived in, you know, like wiping their bums with rocks, for example, you know, that was the norm. There was no toilet paper. There was no bidets.
No. And number 7 is, do not say something that cannot be understood. A teacher should not speak in a manner that is unclear and assume that his students will figure out what he meant on their own. If a student is left to interpret the lessons for himself, he might misunderstand them in a way that is so far from the truth that he eventually becomes a heretic. Someone who denies the Torah or its basic beliefs. This is Rav's first explanation.
What was that, Peter? Repeat that last one.
If a student is left to interpret the lessons for himself, he might misunderstand them in a way that is so far from the truth that he eventually becomes a heretic. The other side of that, of course, is when they talk about mystic learning.
Mystic learning?
Yeah. The Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Classically, you're not supposed to spell it out.
Is that true?
Classically, you're supposed to hint at it and let them work their way through to the proper answer.
Is that true?
Yeah.
That kind of flies in the face of the name itself, because Kabbalah means to receive. It has to be like a oral tradition.
Well, from whom? You're receiving it with help from heaven.
Yeah?
It's another way of looking at it. But that was one reason why you weren't supposed to do Kabbalah till you were 42, until you were completely versed. So these groups of Kabbalists in Sfat and places like that, they would talk in hints, so that you had that moment of enlightenment yourself. You acquired the knowledge by leading the good life and being filled with enlightenment by God. It's a little bit like, they tell you to do your Talmudic studies not 100 times, but go over it 101 times, because the moment of enlightenment will come out to you if you're not understanding it after the 100.
I see. I understand what you're saying. So it's meant to be epiphanous.
Yeah, ideally. And that's where the Alter Rebbe made such a change when he did the Tanya.
Because he spelt it all out.
He spelt it all out. That was regarded as revolutionary and not really acceptable initially.
Like, I imagine the Zohar had a bit to do with that as well.
Yeah.
So, have you got any other comments, or there's...
Number 8 is, when I'm free, I'll study.
Oh, hang on a sec. I just want to read one thing
Go on.
on the previous one, which was about saying things which can... Do not say anything which cannot be understood. Eventually it will be understood. You should formulate your thoughts clearly and intelligibly so that they need no further clarification. Alternatively, do not say anything which cannot be heard. Do not share your secrets even with your best friends, nor should you even whisper it when you are all alone, believing that it cannot be discovered. Eventually it will be heard and discovered. As is written in Kohelet, curse not the king, not in your thoughts, and curse not the rich in your bedchamber, for a bird in the air shall carry the voice. Did you know this? That the sages added from Yalkut Shimoni on Kohelet, the wall has ears. Did you know the walls have ears is a Jewish concept? No. I didn't know that. I'm not sure whether that's the Yalkut Shimoni saying it as a commentary on Kohelet, or it's actually in Kohelet itself. That's fascinating. It's a Jewish concept, the walls have ears. So that's to do not say anything which cannot be understood, eventually will be understood. I don't know.
Well, the curious thing about that is the guy for the plagues, Ramblings.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What are you pointing at?
No, I'm just pointing at...
Okay.
Just...
Sorry, I thought there was you're pointing at a book.
No. The whole concept of that is that he doesn't spell everything out. He gives you the Greek philosophy, but at the same time, he doesn't spell it out. I read an introduction to it, a letter he wrote to somebody that he was sending the manuscript to, saying that if you know, you will understand.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it you have to leave up to your own elucidation. Yeah. You do.
Yeah.
It's like you and I you can go through all the commentaries, but you still have to discuss it. How much can you possibly write down?
You find another way of looking at it.
Yeah. And maybe something that is more applicable to you in your circumstance.
Okay, a person should not put off Torah study because he is too busy. Being busy is a never-ending excuse, since there is no limit to the distractions that each day can bring. And unless you make time today, you could go your entire life without studying Torah at all. That's Rabbi again.
Right. And that's where we get that principle as well of making the study of Torah a fixed habit. So you devote time to it. Like we do, Peter. We've tried to do.
As we've done often enough. And in a sense, you know, when you think about it, it fits in very well with what he says at the beginning.
Which is?
Don't withdraw yourself from the community.
What does that mean?
Well, the way I'm looking at it at the moment is, by learning, you are, even if you're not with the community, you're joining yourself to the community. It's a learning community. And I may be learning with you, but by learning with you, I'm still part of the whole cycle.
By learning with you.
You know,
Yep.
that's being part of the community.
That's interesting. Yep. That just from my own personal perspective, I get that completely. When I started yeshiva, it was all a bit too much for me in the beginning, but you know, I stuck with it, and you tend to have things kind of it's kind of attached to you, you know, as you're going along, even if you don't get it.
And it's the thing that's going on that becomes part of it, not necessarily the meaning, but whether you're involved.
Yeah.
You're not detached.
Yeah.
So again, it's like being part of the community.
Yeah.
You're involved.
Yeah, when they took the kind of the annual photo of the yeshiva, you're there with everyone else.
Yeah.
Like as Gabby was getting upset a month or so ago about all the hard work she had. She had really hard work to do. And she's a bit of a perfectionist, and she wants to do everything 110% right and do the best she can possibly do, which is admirable. But I said to her, at the end of the day, you know, no matter what marks you get, you're going to come out with the same piece of paper that everyone else gets.
Yeah.
And you will set yourself apart by doing great work, but you know, you're already kind of okay just by you don't have to stress yourself out and go nuts over it.
And that really is the way to keep yourself in focus.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Actually, there's more. There's a lot more to that, isn't there? That's right. You don't that's interesting. You don't have to separate yourself from the community and think that you can be above the community. As in, I don't have to do more or better than the rest of the community.
Or I need to shine, or if I don't shine, I'm worthless.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of people do.
Which can lead to depression.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be Mahadrin on the Mahadrin.
No.
You know what I mean? It's not necessary. And it's a waste of time. It's futility.
In fact, it's bad for you.
It's bad for you, yeah. Shkoyach.